heard a lot about the context in which our consumers are operating in. We spoke about cognitive empathy, really understanding what our consumer is going through. We had a nice chat with Uche. He spoke about the diversity of Nigeria in the market, really understanding it from a retail perspective. But now I'm going to go into, as Nema mentioned, the fun part, and creating that brand love with your consumers. And I'm really calling this presentation Optimize Before You Buy, excuse me. And we're looking at creative excellence, and we're looking at impact. So at Ipsos, what we do is we combine art, that is your creative, we combine science, which is our methodologies, data collection, and we combine that with knowledge. And we put all of that together and really give you what we call creative excellence and impact. Because it is very important to have that impact with the consumer. And across the globe, we've been looking at some of the communication that has been tested and looking at what impact it has had in consumers. We've actually noted that there's some 4 key aspects of what makes a really good campaign. And the first one is think creative. And I've left creative here on this left-hand side because it is very, very, very key when you're having a campaign and when you're putting a campaign together. Now the next 3 about really to do with the media plan. So think reach. How are you going to maximize on the number of people within your target audience that you're going to speak to when you communicate to them? Think campaign. Think about what is it that you actually want to drive and what kind of messages do you want your consumer to be left with? How do you actually make sure you do that best with the touch points, media touch points that you actually select? And the last one is think efficiency, and this is where I think we need to refocus on as a market. A lot of times we find, we're putting all our money on one media platform because, hey, maybe it's a top platform, but when we've been looking at some of our clients' performance, we've seen that they're spending money on a medium that is not delivering any more value for them. And hence we need to see how do we activate growth through greater value. And we want to speak about the value aspect of your media buy when we think about efficiency. So let me go back to creativity, because it is very important. And the reason I say it is important because it is business. And I'll give you an example. I'm not a very avid tea drinker. I'm rather indifferent. If tea is there, I'll have the tea. If it's not there, I don't have to have tea. But one day I was in the shops and I was just browsing or walking through the aisles. And I happened to pass through the tea aisle and I saw, hey, one of these colorful boxes. And so I went to have a closer look. I'm used to seeing like Hawaiian tea boxes, kind of your whites, your browns, maybe your greens. But these were teal, these were fuchsia. These are like millennial colors that really caught my eye. And then I went a little bit closer, I was like, hey, they have a QR code. Who's the new marketing manager in this organization? We just get reach a gold. And to cut a long story short, that creativity in the packaging has made me a loyal consumer. So I always carry reach a gold sachet somewhere. I pick the actual flavors based on the colors. Because I'm a very Pinteresty person and I like my kitchen to look very pretty. I can have a green there, a teal, a nice orange, a nice red, or I should say tangerine. So creativity is business, and I'm actually a loyal consumer based on the creativity of the packaging. So you can take my word for that, or you can listen to an expert. There's the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer of Unilever, who said the hard evidence is that creative work is more memorable, more effective, and more able to drive overall business performance. That is his job. So clearly he might have some experience there. But we're going even further. We're going to put it on a numbers perspective, be quantitative about it. And some of the creatively awarded campaigns in the IPA effectiveness database over a span of about 8 years drove 11 times the market share gains at equivalent level of share of voice. So, they had the same kind of impact in terms of the media that they were pushing the creative through, but because of the power of the creativity, those brands were actually able to drive market share gains. So it really speaks to how creativity is business. Now, across our comms testing, because of this, we have realized that 75% of campaign effectiveness is driven by the creative. But for creativity to really work, it needs a spark. It needs a human truth. And we heard about that by listening to understand the context in which our consumers are operating, really getting to that point of cognitive empathy. And that is where we get that human truth, where we're able to now start being a bit more creative. And I just want to show you one ad. It's just a random ad we selected, but when we looked at some of the tests that, or the metrics that we looked at when we test ads, we found that it scored very highly on all our key metrics. So let's have a look.
Hello? Aidilaba tu wetu.
Nisi kama ni kazi utafanya?
Tu ndani ikiwa na moshi peke yako. Hello?
Samahani, siwezi kukutambulisha kutumia sauti yako.
Kitambulisho inasumbua. Hata kama sio kitambulisho singeogwa.
Stay safe from fraud by using your voice as your password. To enroll, dial 456. Jichague na Safaricom Determination, the easiest and most secure way to access Safaricom services.
Nisamehe tu. Nikaanguka roho nilikuwa ameniingia.
Okay. So what worked about that ad? What worked about that communication? I heard you guys laughing, so some kind of resonance, within you. And the first thing is that the message is relatable. How many of us have received SMSs from +2547XXX saying that you've won something? Yeah? How many have received calls? Has anyone received a call? Yeah? And so I guess this is a relatable human truth that really sparked the creativity in this particular campaign. But what was very important, and something that I want us to keep in mind, is that it told a single, simple story. Remember the point at which a consumer is seeing your ad. It's a TV ad. You're relaxed, you're lying down. You want to be fed with too much information. So you want to just be able to digest it passively and move on to whatever show you're watching. So simplicity is key, and that's what really resonated with the target audience. The next thing is familiarity. It told the story, that human truth, in a familiar setting. I think all of us know about the local eatery. We know about the mama who actually runs a place, and that guy who's in the back who's making the food for everyone, drowning in that smoke. So we are familiar with that kind of context. And then also the choice of cast. I think in Kenya we really like our comedians. Comedy does add to that kind of emotive hook in our creative. And the choice of Jogosh was quite good. And the way in which he communicated and really brought to life the scene worked very well. But most importantly, it was relevant. This particular ad was speaking to a lower socioeconomic class, and when we looked at the metrics, they scored way above par, way above our benchmarks in terms of likability, in terms of relevance. But we want to make sure that at the end of the day, we're not just entertaining our customers. We want to make sure that there's some degree of gain on our bottom line or top line. So I want us to just look at another ad which we tested in 2012 that really worked on some of these key metrics that we looked at. And let's have a look.
Mono milk, fresh, natural, original, and affordable.
That ad did particularly well. And I think it wrote in the human insight that people just didn't want packaged milk. They wanted the milk to be fresh, like it was from a cow. to the extent that it can be used in dowry exchanges. And after that testing that ad, we saw an increase in purchase intent by 27%. So can you see the impact of creative on just priming the consumer, setting the context for the next time they're in the shops? Hey, actually, that bowl of milk, I know it's fresh, let me pick it up. But this human context is very important to understand, and to really be able to empathize with the consumer is very important. And I think a couple of years ago, you may remember the case with Pepsi and the apology they had to make. They tried to run a human insight, but executed it quite poorly. They said they had to apologize. And I want to draw your eye to one of the statements in that apology. It says, clearly we missed the mark. So you may have that consumer insight, that human truth, but the way in which you execute it is very important. So how do we prevent ourselves from doing that? You can do a lot of creative testing, testing the creative to make sure that before you go on screen, before you have to apologize to a public for making certain assumptions, you're in the right place. So that's the creative. We thought creative. Now let's look a bit more on the media plan. What is supporting that creative to get us to see it as consumers? And this is a slide that we've used quite a bit because it is so, relevant to our space now. We're moving away from our mass media to a more fragmented media space where we have more control of the content that we watch and the time that we watch it. And as a result, we're becoming a bit more distracted. We're watching TV at the same time we're on our phones and we're browsing. And we're not just saying this because we do it ourselves, we've also proved that through some of our data. And traditional media is suffering. It's competing for time with online media. Increasingly more time is being spent online as traditional media is declining. So I know as advertisers you're saying, okay, so I allocate more of my budget to online media. But this is where we think about the campaign. What are we wanting to achieve? And it really depends on who we want to speak to. Whether it is the user or the non-user of your brand or your product. And the strategies will be very different for both. Now through our global studies, we've found that for non-users, when it comes to the digital space, they tend to be less likely to recall any advertising by brands they don't use. About 25 to 30% have less, are less able to recall communication vis-a-vis brand users. And if you think about this, when you're online, are you actually passively, getting the communication? Are you actually selecting the content you watch? So this is where we have much more control. So if you're going to communicate to a user, you can use digital. This would work quite well. But if you're looking at a non-user, digital might not be as effective. And what we're seeing is that broadcast and in-store media, actually works a bit better. Again, think about the time you're watching TV, you're passively receiving that communication and the visuals in a more of a relaxed space. And maybe you can say, okay, I'll be entertained by this ad, with a good creative, and I can get to know about the brand and maybe I'll select it next time. Or you go in store, like my case with Kariuki. I had no intention of buying any tea, but that creative worked. It was in the right place at the right time and I picked it up and I'm now a user. So that's a campaign aspect, choosing the right touch points for who it is that you actually want to speak to. But now we go into the efficiency side of things. Are we going to put all our money online? Because we're looking at the user. Are we going to put all of our money on Facebook? Are you going to put all of your money on YouTube? And the fact is, because of this kind of hype around online media, we're finding a lot of people are spending money on buying too many impressions online. And I'll give another example. I am not a very relaxed passenger when it comes to road trips. I'm actually a very nervous passenger for some odd reason. I've really tried not to be an anxious passenger. And there was a time we were driving from Mombasa to Nairobi. And I had to sit in the front seat, which is the worst place for me to sit. So my friend gave me a game. He said, you know what? Play this word game. At least I was engaged, I was distracted. And the word game actually required you to watch ads to gain more points. I remember this is a 6-hour journey, yeah? So I'm committed to this game, so I'm not looking up, I'm not looking at the road. And I wanted to get more points, but every time I had to get more points, I had to watch an ad. And I kept seeing the same ads over and over and over and over again. I think I saw one of the ads about 50 times because I wanted to get that many points. But after about the 4th or 5th time, I was like, okay, this ad runs for 30 seconds. I'm just going to hold my phone so that they know I'm still, on my phone and still engaged with the game. I'll chat, maybe look outside for 30 seconds, come back and play my game. But that someone has actually invested in all those impressions, but I am not actually watching it. I'm not actually looking at the content. I've seen it already. Get someone else on a different platform, a different way of them seeing that communication, because you're wasting your ads there. And in 2016, it was found that 20% of digital budgets were actually wasted because of buying too many impressions. Now, if you bring it down to the local space, and I can see Damir, I'm going to borrow one of the phrases that you used. A lot of the time, we're actually buying minutes as opposed to buying eyeballs. So remember, you've spoken about understanding your consumer. You've looked at the touch points that work best for your campaign. Are you going to put all your money in one space and waste it there? Are you just going to put all your money on prime time for 5 minutes and off prime for 5 minutes? Does that actually work for your target audience? Maybe after a few times of watching the news, 3-4 times in a week, they've seen your ad, but maybe there's someone else like them, or within your target space who's on a different channel at a different time. And how are we actually effectively using our budgets to speak efficiently to them? So to sum up, think creative, very important, then think reach, think campaign, and think efficiency. Because at the end of the day, you really do want to make a lasting impression. So I'm going to finish off with an ad. I'm going to play a few seconds of it. I hope the tech is on my side. I want you guys to guess which ad this is. And I think it really did perform well on some of the metrics that you look at in communications testing. Let's have a look. Okay, what ad is that?
Safari.
And why do you know this?
That's song.
It was repeated many times. Okay. Now this ad did very well, and instead of using comedy as an emotive hook, I think it was the music, it was the visuals that really create that emotive hook with consumers and that kind of resonance. Let's continue watching. Thank you very much, guys. Now, before I leave, I actually want to invite one of our clients, Beatrice Nyamari. Oh, sorry. We've actually worked with Coca-Cola for quite a while, quite a few years, and Beatrice is the IMC franchise manager. And I had to Google, what is IMC? It's the Integrated Marketing Communications Manager of SEWA, so Central, East, and Western Africa. And Beatrice has 13 years experience in media, and she's worked for Bharti Airtel, she's worked for Scan Group, and now she's with Coca-Cola. She's been there for about 4 years now, I think since 2015. And she's established quite a few media assets for Safaricom. I think it was a World Cup. I mean, for Coca-Cola, sorry, Safaricom. For Coca-Cola. There's the Voice Nigeria. And she's also done some recent work with Coke Studio and really integrating and optimizing for TV and radio multicast. She's interested in innovation, in new technology, in music, yeah? And she's a mother of 2 boys. So welcome, Beatrice. So we're just going to have a short discussion with Beatrice. Allow me to use my phone because I don't like paper. Is it better? Okay.
Good morning.
Okay, so I've known Beatrice very much through email. When I was a young researcher, we used to send reports. I know Beatrice Nyamari at XXX, yeah. So it's nice to actually be interacting with her now and also the past few months as well. So as someone who markets across Africa, how do you make sure that you're actually connecting with the consumer across all those markets? To me, that seems very difficult.
Across Africa. And I guess the key thing when you look at Africa, it's not a market, it's not one market, and therefore you need to look at, first of all, what your objectives are within the context of the company you're operating in. Align your objectives, whether it's through a system alignment. From a Coca-Cola perspective, I have to align with the bottling company, I have to align with the franchise, I have to align with the global team, I have to align with the BU team. So all those stakeholders need to be all on the same page before you start your journey on communications. So the first piece is actually that alignment piece, and if all of us are on the same page, it makes it easier for us to move faster and to be agile in terms of the changes that need to be made when you put your plan together. The second thing is extended teams. Now, I'm Beatrice, one human being sitting in Kenya looking after 14 markets. How do I do it on my own? I can't do it on my own, so I have to work with an extended team of accomplished specialists. So the agencies, lean on your agencies, make them your extended partners, ensure that they are also learning around your brand and become the experts around the brand. I met Armando Mora earlier, and we spoke about what he knows from a global perspective. From a global perspective, he understands about our brand edge. Is that trickling down to my Ipsos team locally? So that's also an important piece for me. So the extended teams, be it your agency partners, be it your media partners, be it your cross-functional team members that you work with, also help you build your plans in a more effective way. And then the role sort. So think of it this way. I have multiple agencies I have to work with, whether it's a creative agency, whether it's a digital agency, the media agency, the research agency, and all those people all together. What is the role sort that helps us build this plan? So once that's very clear for you, and ensuring that there is a collaborative way that these people work together helps you build a plan in a stronger way. And then the routines. Again, I'm not going to be in every market every single day. So the business planning, the chapters that we have, you have to sit in terms of a conversation with the teams that build the plans globally as well as locally and in market as well. The business briefs that you put together, the connection briefs that help you bring the plan to life, the ideation and the production of the content, and eventually the execution of those plans. So you've executed the plans, thank you. Then we move on. You need to refine those plans. You need to keep refining them on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, learning, cross-checks against the business objectives, putting together reports in terms of what has happened, going into the market actually, doing market visits and understanding what's going on, and the consumer immersions. And I like what you said, April, around the consumer immersions, the empathy bit. It's so important in understanding your consumer. And obviously thinking through other short-term assignments to learn from other markets.
Wow, okay, that's a lot. No, I mean, it makes sense given your role and given the various stakeholders you have to work with. what I'm hearing a lot of it is optimization of processes, of the communication. But what about your global campaigns? Because you have your World Cup campaigns, you have your Taste the Feeling campaigns. How do you execute them effectively across the markets that you manage?
So I'm looking at some of the people who worked at the Coca-Cola company. You raise your hands, past people who worked at the Coca-Cola company. Mukuna, I see you, all of you here. And I think the beautiful thing with working for a global company, it also helps you build your input from a local perspective into the local output that comes from a global level to the local markets. So the key thing that we have learned is to start with the audience and start being audience neutral. So we also have this thing that, I've been here longer than you have. It's called Balti. So you usually start the journey and say, but I've been here longer than you have, so I know the consumer in this market. You have to stop that. You have to start with understanding that the consumer comes first and the audience comes first by understanding their behavior, by understanding their location, by understanding their context. And again, I go back to what both Hilda and April said, that empathy, interview, that context understanding, the fact that the consumer is changing is something that you need to input from a local level to a global level. So once that's aligned, the communication becomes easy in terms of how you bring it to life. So that understanding is the most important piece before you start your journey. And then the optimization in terms of what you have. What is the level of the brand you're activating? Is it a new brand? Is it an existing brand? Is it a challenger brand? Is it an explorer brand within the context of the market you're operating in? So all those dynamics come into play when you're building the piece around a global plan to roll out. So it could be that you're rolling out Pari, for example, in Kenya. Nobody has ever heard of Pari in Kenya. It's a global brand. But within the context of Kenya, what does that mean? What level are you playing at? So once that's done, then you optimize the assets that you have in place. And the assets could be your brand assets, they could be existing assets from a global perspective. They could be assets in terms of the heritage that the brand has within the market. And so once you use that, plan around the flexibility of that plan. So I'll give an example of the World Cup. So you know that, again, Balti, you know the consumer, right? Mm-hmm. How many of you watch football? Please put up your hands.
Watch football.
Watch football. Yeah, so the assumption would be that only males watch football, right? That's the wrong assumption. Look at the hands up. There are a lot of females who watch, lots of young females who watch football. So how do you make the love of football for the older male audience, to the younger target, to the female audience? So creating those plans that optimize the fact that, there's flexibility in the audience, there's flexibility in how you activate that plan. And being able to have an always on and always ready plan for each one of those consumers kind of helps you move forward. And then looking at guidelines. So think of a Somalia plan versus a Kenya plan versus an Angola plan. Think of the flexibility around the media choices that you have in that place to be able to get that plan. Share those guidelines with the markets so that they have also the freedom to experiment and risk take within that environment. Create a portal for sharing and quick approvals for any changes that you need to make around those plans. And then track, measure, learn, relearn.
Again, lots of optimization. And how do you use your the media assets? How do they support the communication through probably your traditional ads?
We have, from a Coca-Cola perspective, on brand Coke, we have two assets. We have Coke Studio and we have Coca-Cola. So one is a grassroots football program and one is a music asset that we created. So they speak to kind of the same audience but differently. So from a grassroots perspective, you want to be able to connect with the teams at the local level. So if I've been tapping into the love of this consumer through football, why not extend the love of football through the grassroots program? And this is exactly what we did last year. So we did Coca-Cola under 15, brought 12 African teams into Kenya, helped them, participate in an under 15 tournament. By bringing the best out of those markets, out of the 12 markets that were participating. Now, think of the love that you build for this child who's never left their country from Zimbabwe, who's never gotten into the capital city, and for the first time has to travel into Kenya and experience a cultural melting point for them. Meeting new people, leaving the country, playing football, a key passion point, and building those relationships for their future, because you're building really global ambassadors by the time you do that kind of thing. So looking at your assets as things that extend your campaign rather than those things that just enable it, but also using them to tap into the reality and empathy of the consumer.
That's quite interesting. I think from my perspective, I really deal with the numbers, but understanding how a media asset can extend the campaign is quite remarkable. As someone who's worked across East Africa for quite a while, what do you see as the challenges and the opportunities?
I have a shopping list. Well, I think we rely a lot on historical data. And anyone who knows my philosophy around data knows that I seek data like a mad person. And I'll challenge my agency. Emma knows this from a Kenya perspective. From a global perspective, Amaro knows this as well. We challenge the existence of future data. And the challenge that we have in most of our markets is heavy reliance on first and third party sources of data, and forget that there's a second party data that we can actually activate. And so in the absence of data in markets like DRC, what do? Am I going to sit there and say I'm waiting for Ipsos to get there and do something about it? No, I think it's for us to use touch points as an opportunity to capture and harness data. And for me, that's the piece that we need to think about. How do you mine data in the existence of no data? The other piece is around what you spoke to, Damir, and our love for noise. So instead of the bigger logo that is spots around a program, can we add value to the consumer by creating lasting connections? Guys, it's kind of tiring when you keep doing the same thing.
Do you have any closing thoughts as you wind up?
Yes, it's a challenge to the team. We spoke, Hilda spoke to this. She spoke about we can't lean on historical data. So my challenge is, can we look at real-time marketing audience measurement? Can we also think about audience digital mindset and behavior comparisons? But can we also look at the implementation of benchmarks and norms that speak to Africa? And I'm here speaking about the digital video pre-testing. I think it's one of the areas that we haven't gotten into, but from a global perspective, we're doing very well. So why are we not establishing norms for us in Africa?
Challenge accepted features. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing lots of insight. I didn't actually think I'd get so much information within a short period of time. I'd like to hand it back to Nema, but before I do, I want to just play something, a Coca-Cola ad, which rides on two insights. First, on two levels.
On playing the ad, I'd like to remind you about the app and about the question. We're about to go into an open floor session. So I hope I'm sure you have lots of questions and lots of comments, so let's make use of that platform.
So, you want to freak at the cola, but you have to drink it here.
I love that ad because it defines thirst on 2 levels.